this year we've got this theme of Avalokiteshvara, an archetypal Buddhist figure. There's a picture of him just here on the shrine if you're not familiar with the figure. And tonight's title is what to do when your head explodes. So many of you will know the story that this is alluding to, but certainly not all of us. And it's always, the good thing about stories is that you can never hear them too many times, unless that's not always true, is it? Like, you know, like Granny's story about how, whatever it was, you know, some stories I have heard too many times, but the best stories I have not. Hopefully you will agree that this is a good story which bears hearing again. So, so Avalokiteshvara is an archetypal Buddhist figure. He's not a historical person. And in a way, the story is actually very simple and very short. So I'll just tell it to you. And then I'll kind of tell it again with a bit more of a kind of like a commentary or exploration of the themes. Then I'll talk a bit about, maybe tell you some of the stories of what it evokes in me. And then I'll ping you off to talk about what you've made of all of that. So the story in its purest, most simple form, Avalokiteshvara is this kind of like he's a like a young kind of innocent archetypal being, and his goal is to bring well-being to not just to the world, to the universe. So he's got a very pure idealism, as it were, very pure aspiration. So he goes to his kind of like his Buddha teacher. Let's not get complicated, but anyway, his Buddha teacher, and he makes this great vow, and he says, "I want to dedicate every moment of my life to the liberation of beings. And if I stop, if I lose faith, even for a second, let my head explode, let me be torn apart. I just want to give completely and fully of myself." And so his kind of like his Buddha father, his Buddha teacher, of course, hears this great aspiration, this great desire to be a force for good in the world, and affirms that and resonates with that. And I sort of imagine saying, "Off you go." So anyway, so Avalokiteshvara sits down to meditate, remembering this is an archetypal story, image. And he sits down and he starts kind of, you'll be familiar with kind of Buddhists have these kind of like malas, these kind of prayer beads. So he starts chanting this mantra to kind of liberate beings. And him being like this powerful archetypal being, every mantra he says saves a being, liberates them from suffering, frees them from the pain and difficulty of life. So he's doing this, kind of meditating, maybe just like we were meditating just now, kind of, you know what that's like, kind of like you've got this aspiration to be present, to be aware, to be alive to yourself. So just the same Avalokiteshvara is doing this, kind of, you know, maybe saying, "May you be well, may you be free from suffering, may you grow." And each time he says this, a being is freed. Amazing, wonderful wish and aspiration. And he does this for a long time, endless time. We're in the realm of myth, we're in the realm of image. So he does this. But he's also aware, and of course, one of the things he's aware of is like, he's just got this, you know, like helping one being at a time. But of course, beings are endless. You know, worlds are endless, beings are endless. Pain, unfortunately, is endless. So although it's like, you might imagine it's a bit like, I don't know, the image that comes to my mind is a bit like if you imagine trying to catch water as it drips through a tap or something like that. So you put your hand under a tap and your hand does catch some water, doesn't it, for sure. But of course, drips get through your fingers if you're trying to hold water in your hand. So Avalokiteshvara is trying to hold living beings in his hands to free them, to save them, to protect them. But of course, you can't hold water in your hands. It doesn't work. The water seeps through. So he's kind of got this sense of this happening, and maybe you had this experience for yourself in meditation just now. So he's got this positive aspiration. He wants to be aware. He wants to be present, but he can feel the cracks forming. He can feel like his mind is kind of it's like in all of the, you know, like it's kind of juddering with the tension of it. He's desperately trying to help everyone, but he's losing faith, he's losing confidence. He can feel the water falling through his hands. And just for a moment, he cracks his eyes open to see what's happening, to look around. And what does he see? Well, of course, he sees, you know, as is the way with us human beings, he doesn't see the water in his hands, the good that he's done. He sees the water that's not in his hands, the water that's fallen through his hands, the loss, the mistakes. And of course, unfortunately, he's made a vow which says that if I lose faith and trust even for a moment, may my head explode. And that's a strong thing to say. We're in the realm of archetype, and that's what happens. He's torn apart. His moment of doubt, his moment of realization of the impossibility of what he's trying to do anyway, tears him apart. The pain and the loss, the fear, the frustration, the disillusionment, the disappointment. Again, maybe we're all familiar with these experiences, maybe not to this intensity. And he's torn apart, and he's kind of, again, because we're in the realm of archetype, this doesn't kill him. He's just kind of like, there's these shreds of being just kind of spewing around. Like, I like watching action movies and particularly superhero films. So this sort of imagery comes easily to me because I can, you know, like I see things like that in superhero movies all the time. So maybe it doesn't come so easily to you, but just this image of this very pure wish to help, being fragmented, being disrupted by the reality of life, the impossibility. So he's lying there kind of, and he kind of crying out. And Amitabha, this is his kind of Buddha father, his Buddha teacher, kind of sees the pain of his son, his spiritual son. And he comes down and he brings healing. He brings the balm of well-being. And in the image, what happens is he recognizes the purity of Avalokiteshvara's aspiration, but also the impossibility of it. So he helps him. So he puts Avalokiteshvara back together again. But this time not with 2 arms, but with 1,000 arms. So again, if you can look at this picture later, there's like a great halo around this figure, and each of those represents a different arm. And the symbolism of that is for many and varied ways that we can help. So it's like he was trying to do it just with 2 hands. Well, that's not possible. Once you've got 1,000 hands, well, you can help more, you can help differently. Each of those hands holds a different thing. They hold, you know, scales and pens and swords and secateurs and kind of, I don't know, cooking spoons and laptops and whatever it is, all of it, guitars, looking around the room, trying to think of different things that people do, plays, films, you know, like manuscripts, all of these different things. He's all these different ways of responding to God. And he's got not one, he's put together not with 1 head now, but with 10 heads. And this represents his ability to look in all the different directions of the world. So he's not kind of focused in one direction, missing out on what's around him. His attention is no longer narrow, it's expanded to include everything. And Amitabha, in the realm of myth, takes his own head and places it on top of Avalokiteshvara's head. So wisdom more fully permeates Avalokiteshvara's experience. And Dada, and now he is more able to respond to the cries of the world and goes off happily into the archetypal sunset, liberating beings. So that's the story, that's the image. And of course, we've got this question tonight, what to do when your head explodes, or what do we do when our head explodes, which of course, in a way, that's referring to the core drama of this image, as it were. So you've got this aspiration to help, being unfulfilled, being broken, being shattered, and then hopefully finding healing. So that's what we're going to attempt to focus on. So I'm just going to kind of go through that again, but I'm going to kind of give a bit more of a spin on it, or a particular way, the way that I've been thinking about it, is preparing for this evening. Which, of course, the wonderful thing about image is some of you will have already liked that image, some of you will have not, some of you'll have all different kinds of associations. So it's important. The great thing about stories is allowing their resonance to be our own, to be touched in our own ways. but to share mine with you. So I'm going to somewhat, as is often my way, I'm going to slightly twist the story to make a point. So if you're a purist, you might be thinking, I mean, that's not how it goes. It's like, I don't care, it's a story, do what you want with it. This is what I'm doing with it. So with those caveats, so in a way, so let's just look at the character. So I suppose Avalokiteshvara, what first strikes me about him is he's young, both in the archetypal symbolism of Buddhism. Avalokiteshvara is young, he's 16 years old, seen as like an Indian symbolism. That's kind of the first flowering of maturity of adulthood. So there's something very pure about that kind of innocent. But of course, what comes with innocence is naivety. And you might, and this is me kind of caveating a bit, go as far as to say there's a certain level of arrogance, actually. Like here he is. So you've got this kind of like this wise Buddha figure. And he kind of goes up to him and says, I'm going to liberate all beings all on my own. Get me. As I say, I'm overplaying for, well, in a way to draw out a particular point. So here, yeah, so we've got this. So, and maybe this I would suggest that probably for many of us, this particular moment is the one which we most easily relate to. This, like the story of me, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the important one. I'm going to save the day. You know, you can be any age you like and still be very, very tied into the story of I'm going to do this. I've got to do this. I'm the one who's special, who's important. So you've got Avalokiteshvara in that kind of mode. And it's important to remember that in this case, he might be youthful and naive and arrogant, but he's also got an incredibly positive motivation. Let's not underestimate that. He does want to liberate all living beings from suffering. So as I'm gently poking fun at him, let's not forget the beauty of that wish. So in one of Buddhism's most famous kind of books for Bodhisattva, the dedication. Anyway, for Bodhisattva, it's a kind of like it's a practice. It's an evocation of the power of practice. One of my favorite lines in it is for the author talking about this kind of mood. He says, "Most beings don't even think to want to end the pain of headaches, even for themselves." Yeah, so probably that would be true for all of you. Like if you think, you know, if we're talking about suffering, you don't even think that not having a headache again in the rest of your life is possible. I would suggest. And here we've got somebody who's saying, not just let's get rid of headaches, let's get rid of pain. Let's end pain for everyone. That is an incredibly beautiful aspiration to live your life by. Like notwithstanding the naivety, the impossibility of it, let us just celebrate anyone wanting, just having this kind of the openness of heart to want to bring about the end of pain for others. And of course, we all do in our own ways. As I look around the room, you know, many of you I know, and it's like you dedicate a lot of time and energy to helping people in your professional lives. I can look around this room as kind of running care homes, you know, nurses, therapists, kind of there's a lot of love, there's a lot of care in the room, but yet to have that love and care kind of turned up to, not just turned up to 11, it's like turned up to infinity. So that's what Avalokiteshvara does. But anyway, but it's naive, and in a way, this is one of the core things. So I think is worth exploring. So he's got this. Because in some ways, what we're talking about is what to do when your head explodes. It's like, well, in a way, my core point is like, how do we get to a situation where our heads exploded in the first place? And I would suggest for a crucial factor in that is one of them is having enough of an aspiration to make a difference that you've kind of created this. Because like your head doesn't explode if you don't care. That's the point, isn't it? If you're just like, whatever, don't care, I'm on my phone, good luck. Your head doesn't explode, but that's not a worth life living. That's to dismiss and deny the feeling that we have for other living beings, the feeling that we have for ourselves, the feeling that we have for each other. We'll come back to that in a bit. So Avalokiteshvara, he's got this very pure, amazing, beautiful aspiration, but it's again, you know, those of you who like superhero movies or action movies kind of get this. So if you imagine you've got this kind of this bright aspiration, it's like the sun, but there's these kind of like threads of corruption running through them. Corruption's that's a bit over dramatic, but these threads of self-preoccupation, self-obsession, self-reference. I want to save beings. So it's not good enough for you to save yourself. I want to be the hero. I want to be the one. I want to be the one who everybody loves. That's the problem. Just to make it clear from day one, that's the problem. And of course, that's what causes Avalokiteshvara to fail, to lose, to die, because he's not, if this aspiration had been, may I contribute to the well-being of beings, it would have been fine. He would have just been happily getting on with it. But it was more self than that. It's like, I want to be the one who saves everyone. At that point, you're doomed. Yeah, you're doomed. And he's doomed, and he's destroyed. He collapses, he breaks. And the key thing here, of course, is to not lose heart. Yeah, so we're those of us in the room, there's quite those of us at home, there's quite a mixed range of ages. But I'm sure all of us have at different times of our lives known the pain of frustrated idealism. We've got this hope. It might be for a relationship, it might be for a project at work, it might be for whatever, just having a party, just having a nice time, just taking your granny to the beach or whatever it is. So we all know it's like we've got this wish to make a difference, to help, to contribute. And we all know that it almost never turns out quite how we thought it would. We've got the story, we've got the image. It's like, it's going to be great. Maybe it's nothing to do with helping people. Maybe it's just like, oh, I'm going to go on holiday and I'm going to go on holiday. I'm going to have a fantastic time. As soon as there's I involved, this kind of strong sense of me at the center of things, at some point that's going to be frustrated. At some point it's not going to work out the way you wanted it to work out. And this is the point where, in a way, this is the crucial point, isn't it? Again, coming back to this thing, do we give up? Do we become disillusioned? Do we become cynical? Do we withdraw? Do we say there's no point, it's not worth it? Da-di-da-di-da. We've all had this experience. They'll do this, they won't listen, nah. And it's not to say that isn't true. Sometimes, again, looking around the room, some of you have got very demanding family situations, jobs, where it's like, it's really hard to help people. It's really hard. So how do we not lose hope? That's the question. How do we allow when that beautiful dream, whatever it was, gets crushed, gets broken by the difficulty, the complexity, the strain of life, how, rather than being torn apart, do we get put back together again? Do we become healed? Do we become wise? So I'm gonna pause with, I'm gonna tell you a different story. I'm gonna tell you a story from my own life. So there's as Roz was saying earlier, so I first moved to Birmingham in 2006, and one of the big attractions for me was this intensive Dharma thing, as I call it, was being run by one of the most senior and respected teachers in this tradition, a man called Subhuti, who, this is 15 years ago, at that point he'd dedicated 35 years of his life to teaching Buddhism in this community, written books, set up Buddhist centers and retreat centers. And it's just like, he's a really remarkable man. And one of the big attractions for me for doing this Dharma intensive thingy was to meet him, to be taught by him. So I showed up, and it was he'd been away in India. He spends many months a year in India kind of teaching people, trying to help people. teaching them Buddhism. And it was the first night I was staying in this house with all the bigwigs where he lived. It was his first night back. And people were saying to him, oh, so how was India? And he was like, blah, 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 told a few stories. But then he told this story. And so at this point, where it's 2006, at this point, Subhuti's dedicated 33 years of his life, a bit more than that, actually 36 years of his life to, basically that's all he's done for his whole life, is teach people about Buddhism, write books, run retreats, create centers, run classes, blah, blah, blah. And it was a particularly difficult time in Sri Ratana's history and a very difficult time in his life. And he said, so I was doing... So he said, the story was, he was doing these kind of like tonight, basically. So kind of going around, but he's a bigger name than me. So it's on a bigger scale. So he's going from city to city across the Indian heartlands, giving kind of Dharma talks to lots of people. India, it's a big country, it's lots of people. So it's like maybe 1,000 people a night. So that's quite a lot of people, isn't it? He's done that for years. So he's giving these talks to 1,000 people a night, kind of, trying to encourage them to take heart and to find freedom. Buddhism in India, our Buddhist movement in particular, is associated with the Dalit community. If you're not familiar with that term, it's kind of means the oppressed, and it's some of the most disadvantaged people in Indian society, if not the planet. So it's not, it's challenging work, and it's a real call to dignity, to courage, to valuing their human experience and having a sense of the possibility that they can grow. So this was what he was doing night after night. So he said he was doing this for like a week, 10 days, different, it's different city every night, 1,000 people. But as he was doing it all, he was in a phase of crisis, he'd this whole kind of like, I'm helping people. He'd run on this for years, and it had broken apart. He was having a really difficult time. He'd lost faith, just like Avalokiteshvara had. He was in the wilderness. He was just like, he was kind of doing it, but he's just like, oh God, this is hard. He was in that phase. So here we come to the point of the story, is that, so bear in mind, look, different city, different night, like Indian roads are awful. They were worse back then. So it's like 4, 5, 6 hours driving every day. Then this big kind of performance. So he'd go to the hotel where he was staying every night, and basically he'd go to his room and he'd come back like 12 hours, come out 10 hours later, and he needed that space just to recover, to put himself back together again so he can go on the show again tomorrow night. So about half an hour after he's gone to bed, he gets this knock on the door. So it's like, what gives, this is the time he needs to put himself back together again. So he answers the door, and his friend's there, and his friend says, there's someone here, I think you need to talk to him. And Subhuti says, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, but you're my friend. If you say I need to talk to him, then bring him in, I trust you. So it brings him in. And this guy, he definitely doesn't speak English. He's, and basically walks on, he says, I've got 5 kids. I've got no education. I'm a casual laborer. What that means is like you show up at the place every morning and you see if there's any work, kind of like hard manual work, and you get paid like 50 rupees a day. That's about 50p a day. So this is his life. It's like every day he goes to this place, and most days he doesn't get work, but some days he does. And he says, and I didn't get any work today. I was walking around. I was feeling utterly dejected. I was thinking, what is the point in life? And I was just about to go and buy some like cheap, nasty Indian hooch, kind of homebrew, kind of fire vodka to drown my sorrows, even though that's spending the money for my children's food tomorrow, because I was just so distraught and hopeless. But then I saw this crowd of people gathering, and I thought, well, what the hell? I've got nothing else to do, so I might as well go and see what's going on here. So he went over to the crowd, and of course that was where Subhuti was giving his talk. And Subhuti was talking just very simply about, in a sense, about hope, about the fact that human beings we can take responsibility for our lives and we can transform our lives. It's hard, it's not easy, but it's possible. That's what Subhuti talks about in that environment. And the man says, I feel like I've been released from hell all my life. I'm skimming the whole kind of background to the Indian situation. So if this doesn't quite make sense, I apologize. He says, Like all my life, I've believed that my life is not in my hands. I believe that I'm defined by my caste and by my background, and but there is no hope. You've given me hope. I feel like you've released me from hell. I just came here to say thank you. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to live a different life. I'm going to get my children educated. I'm going to, it's going to be different now. This is all through translation, obviously, because the guy doesn't speak English. And so the way Subhuti describes it is just like, bearing in mind, Subhuti at this point, he's written 6 books, created Buddhist centers. He's taught thousands of people. He's had a positive impact on hundreds of thousands of people's lives, easily. I'm really not exaggerating. And he says, at that point, hearing that one man say that made it all feel worthwhile. Yeah, like this whole, like this, just like, what am I doing? Where am I going? Is it worthwhile? It's like that one moment. And Subhuti says, well, yeah, you're thanking me, but thank you for sharing that story. May it be so. May you transform your life. May it be better from here on. Man walks off. Subhuti's life carries on, he feels a bit better. And well, Subhuti, here he is, that was 17 years ago. He's still dedicating his life to helping people. The sad truth, of course, of that story is that the chances of that man actually following through with his hopes are slim, because life sucks. And it's like, he had a super tough life. Did he turn his life around? Like, I hope he did, but it's definitely not a given. The odds are massively stacked against him. So why am I telling you that story? Well, I suppose there was something for me that I found incredibly moving here. Like, I heard that story 17 years ago, whatever it is, 2006. There's something I found very moving about just hearing that story, because it really, it kind of broke through this whole thing of like, I'm helping you. I'm the one who's making it all better. I'm going to sort it all out. Like Subhuti's operating on a scale which I will never operate on. And that broke for him. It can't, this story of I'm going to sort it all out, I'm the hero, it can't work. Something's got to break. It's got to be more human. And in a way, so that's my invitation to you. That's the core point I want to say tonight. It's like, what to do when your head explodes is realize the extent to which it was all about you in the first place. That might sound a bit heavy, but I think there's quite a lot of truth to it, actually. It's embarrassing to acknowledge the extent to which it's like, I'm trying to help you. It's like, oh, God, it's all about me wanting to feel okay about myself. So to bring that home again, to make that more explicit, what I'm talking about is our egoistic involvement in being the one who helps, being the one who's special, being the one who's important. So I'll give you an example of that from even more directly in my own life. Something we do often on retreats is you kind of have this, particularly at the end of a retreat, you'll have this circle, retreats where you go away and meditate together for a few days in the countryside. At the end, you'll have this circle where people go around and kind of say a few words about how their time there has been. So I do this less than I used to. I'm not going to say I don't do it anymore, because it's not true. But I used to do this much more. As people would be going around, I'd have this very, very strong internal experience of keeping count of how many times my name was mentioned. And people would be like, oh, so that nice thing Ross said about me earlier. I'm like, yep, score 1 for Dharmashalin. His life has been affirmed. And I was definitely keeping score. And I was definitely keeping score with the other people to see who got the best score. It's like, it's just embarrassing, isn't it? It's like, why? But that's human. We do it. I do it. I don't do it. As I say, I do it less now. I used to even do it to the extent when people would be going around, I wouldn't even just be keeping score. I'd be like anticipating the score. I'd be saying, well, I had a really nice conversation with Graham yesterday. I wonder if he's going to say that was the best bit of his retreat. And I'd be kind of waiting as it got around to Graham to see, it's like, is he going to say that? And as he's speaking, I'm like, yeah, because I am quite good with people. I can see where he's going. I'm like, oh no, he's going to do it. Yes, he's going to do it. Yes. Oh, no. So watch for that. Be kind to yourself. Like, in a way, I'm kind to myself. I want to help. But in a way, the point is, it's just as Avalokiteshvara land, it's like the extent to which we're doing that, it gets in the way of our ability to help, because it's like when it's more about us than it is about them. That's in a way, so that's the key point. It's like what to do when your head explodes is recognize that your head has exploded probably because you've got too much of your own identity in being the one who's helping and rescuing, and that your head can be healed by letting go of that and saying, oh, it doesn't have to be me. I don't have to be the special one. It doesn't have to be all about me. We can, and I think, so there's two components to this. One of them is seeing it doesn't, so yeah, so in healing Avalokiteshvara, like Avalokiteshvara healed, he's called the 1,000-armed, 11-headed Avalokiteshvara. So there's two things I really want to draw out here, one of which is definitely true, both of which are me kind of making a point, which I think is a valid one. So one of them is Amitabha steps out of the story of rescuing and into the story of helping people. So these tools, they help people, they don't rescue people. So there's a bit more autonomy there. It's not like, oh, there, Graham, I'm here to rescue you. It's like, oh no, maybe I can help you. Maybe something I'm saying to you this evening will help you. Can you see how there's a difference between help and rescue? It's like, it's an important difference, isn't there? So, and I think that that's part of what, in a way, that's part of the wisdom that Amitabha is instilling. It's like, oh, you can help people, you can't rescue people. You can't rescue anyone. And the other thing, of course, he's doing, and this is, in a way, this is the symbolism of the 11 heads. He's saying, and the arms, it's like, well, it's not just you. You don't have to be the one who rescues people. Like maybe it's, I don't know, what would my simple be? Well, I'd be my mouth, because that's the only thing I'm good at is talking. But like maybe what this person needs is something else. Maybe they need the film script or I don't know, for knitting. Maybe that's the gift this person needs. And this sense of community, it's like, oh, we can't save people on our own, but together we can help people. So this is the way which we unexplode our heads, or we resolve the explodedness of our heads. So the other thing I've written here, which I think is quite important, is it's and this is part of a way of letting go of kind of self-preoccupation in a way. It's like seeing life as more of a process and less of an end result. There's something, it's so kind of final and definite. I'm helping you. It's really strong. It's kind of final. It's definite. Whereas it's like, I think what Avalokiteshvara's, the kind of healed Avalokiteshvara sees is it's like it's a process. So that's what we do when our head explodes. It's like we step out of this kind of like this very binary, helped, not helped, saved, not saved, and just into it. Oh, it's a process. It's a continuum. So in a way, what I'm alluding to here is this seeing through to some extent this story of me over here, you over there, saved, not saved, finished, like this very kind of fixing things into categories. It's like life is a process. So one of the images which really sticks with me, this is from the Metabhavana, actually, I'll finish with this image, is, so the Metabhavana, it's this cultivation of loving kindness. And certainly one of the things that I notice for myself in this practice is that at first it's like, I'm over here and you're over there. And it's like, basically you're kind of shifting just from like not hitting people, not fighting with people. So it's like, I'm fighting you, I'm in competition with you, I'm in conflict with you. But what I noticed, so that's like really objectifying other people. But then what I realized is that then I went into this thing of like, I'm helping you, I'm giving you metta, but there's still a lot of separation. It's like, I'm here and I'm helping you. Like I'm the powerful, the safe one, and I'm helping you, little person. It's better, like that's better than punching somebody in the face, but it's still very separate. Do you see what I mean? It's still very like, I'm superior, I'm aloof, I'm not with you. And I think really what for Metabhavana, what the practice of Buddhism, what the image of Avalokiteshvara is inviting us to see more fully, it's like, actually, There's just us. We're in this process. We're in this connection. We're in this relationship. And maybe there's something in that I can do that can help you. But it's much more likely to go well if I've kind of stepped out of this kind of like me separate over here. It's like, oh no, we're us, we're together. We're in life together. I think that's the key message. That, in a way, that's key. I'm now like kind of shoehorning concepts into Avalokiteshvara bunkers. That's the core message. It's like these 1,000 arms, we're in it together. We can grow, we can transform, but it's like, it doesn't work if I try to transform you. We can help each other to transform. That's the image. And that's what to do when your head explodes.